Hi guys, welcome back to In Case of Econ Struggles. If you're finding these videos helpful, make sure to like and subscribe. Today we've got another micro struggle for you. We're talking about the difference between the marginal cost and the average variable cost function. And the way we are going to do that is we are going to first talk about the differences in terms of how the marginal cost and the average variable cost functions are calculated. Then we're going to talk more conceptually about how they are different in terms of their definition and in terms of the concepts. Then I'm going to use grades as an example to really drive home those differences and the relationship between the marginal cost and the average variable cost function. And finally, we'll use that example to also see how they differ graphically and that graphical relationship. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to introduce this cost function. This cost function is going to be the cost of y. The number of ice creams that we are making is going to be y cubed plus 5. And first, let's go ahead and calculate the marginal cost and average variable cost, which I've already done. The marginal cost is 3y squared, and the average variable cost is y squared. Notice that these two are very similar in terms of the equation. It's very easy to get confused between marginal cost and average variable cost or think they're the same thing. And hopefully by the end of the video, those differences will be more clear. Now, let's put together a nice little table to talk about the differences and some similarities between marginal cost and average variable cost. The biggest difference, which we just saw in terms of calculating both of these cost functions, is the fact that marginal cost is a derivative. It's calculated as d dy of cost, or c of y, whereas the average variable cost is defined as the cost of y divided by y. So although the answers came out very similarly, the way we got to each of those functions is fundamentally different. One is a derivative and one is an average. Now, definitions of both of these cost functions are also significantly different. The definition of marginal cost is the cost to produce one more ice cream cone. It's the cost to produce one additional unit, whereas an average variable cost is the cost on average. So I take the variable cost and I divide it by y, and that is how I get average variable cost, which, if you notice in this table, is a little misleading. Let's just put variable cost of y in here instead of total cost, so we make that clear. Now, some similarities are that both of these cost functions do not account for fixed costs. Again, I think that's part of the reason that these concepts, these two cost functions, are also confused with each other. And so hopefully this table, you have a nice differentiating line between the marginal cost and the average cost function. Maybe it's a little blurry, but hopefully the line now makes sense. If it doesn't, feel free to rewind and watch it again. Now, let's talk about this example I keep talking about of grades. Let's talk about the relationship between marginal cost and average variable cost. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to forget about these cost functions for a second. And what I am going to say instead is I'm going to draw this line here. And I'm going to say that this line represents your grades in a given semester. Grades in a given semester. So it can range, maybe here's a 4.0, and over here is a straight 0. Now I am going to also draw a parabola that looks kind of like this. And I'm going to call this your overall GPA. So this is equivalent. These two squiggly equals mean equivalent. This is equivalent to this average variable cost shape you've seen before. And this grades in a given semester, well, this is roughly equivalent to the marginal cost. Now, here's what I want to point out. Let's divide this graph into 3 regions. And the first region I'm going to divide it into is this region. And this region is going to be denoted with your GPA is above your grades this semester, or GTS. Over here, this is where your GPA is lower than your grades this semester. And right here, this dot is where your GPA is equal to your grades this semester. Now, why have I drawn these regions? Well, if I'm over here in this region where my grades this semester are lower than my overall GPA, then your GPA is falling. It's going down if your grades this semester are lower than your average grades. So notice your grades this semester are lower than your GPA, so it's pulling your GPA down. On the other side, when your marginal cost is greater than your average variable cost, when your grades this semester are higher than your overall grades, then your GPA is rising. Your grades this semester are pulling up your GPA. And that's exactly what's happening between the marginal cost and the average variable cost functions. When marginal cost is above average variable cost, marginal cost is pulling that average variable cost up. And when marginal cost is below your average variable cost, then marginal cost is pulling your average variable cost down. And when they're the same, if you get your same GPA in terms of grades this semester, so maybe it's fall of 2021, and the grades you got are exactly the same as what your GPA was going into fall of 2021, then your GPA won't change. They're the same. Similarly, if marginal cost is equal to average variable cost, then your average variable cost isn't going up or down, it's staying exactly the same. So hopefully this video made it a little more clear that marginal cost and average variable cost are different, not just in how they're calculated, but in terms of their concepts. And hopefully this idea of the GPA makes it clear how exactly marginal cost and average variable cost are related. If this made more sense to you, make sure to like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time for another case of Econ struggles.